Hello, thank you very much for sending me those two recordings. I was a bit daft at first, as I have a tendency to be. I couldn't figure out where the second video was until I scrolled down, then I saw it, because I'm easily confused with all things technological. But thanks for sending me both Strumble Head and Blues. So yeah, on the whole, really, really good. I really wanted to stress that to start with, because I saw your comment about sort of making several takes and getting a bit frustrated with mistakes. It's important to remember that I think that you're not, in the grades especially, you're not expected to be a sort of perfect musical robot at all, and the odd slip, the odd mistake is not the end of the world at all. It's far more important to, make the music sort of kind of convey something, have the right sort of character, get as much of the detail in as you can around the dynamics and this sort of expressive stuff, rather than to get too kind of hung up and sort of stressed about, absolute perfection and slips and stuff. They're not expecting you to be a Carnegie Hall professional concert pianist. What they're looking for first and foremost is sort of developing musicianship, and you're showing that off in spades. I mean, both performances I thought really captured the spirits of the piece. In terms of how you play them. You play Strumble Head with it's sort of relaxed, but it's still got a kind of energy the way you play it, and I really like that. I think I play this a little bit like it's in a musical coma, but you've got a lot of you give it a lot of energy, which is really good. And the Blues for Beth, I think you've absolutely kind of nailed the character, so don't fret, you're doing absolutely fine. And the stuff I'm going to suggest in this video are more tweaks than anything else. There's nothing systemically wrong with either of them, just a few little bits to work on, and some suggestions for that. But no, really well done. Remember, it's about the overall performance far more than it is about, oh, he made that mistake, It's, so don't worry, you're doing absolutely fine. I'll start with Strumble Head, just because it's open on the page in front of me. On the whole, really good. I think the main thing with this one is just a few places, just to be a little bit more obvious about the dynamics. And I think it sounded on the video that sometimes you had it absolutely spot on. For example, on that first page, where it goes subito piano, where it suddenly drops to piano in bar 13, that wasn't massively obvious. However, when the same thing happens on the third page of the piece, I could really tell that you really did that well there. So what I'm going to suggest you do for this piece, don't just play it through, because you can do that now. But when you're practicing, I would just pick random points in the music where the dynamics change, either where it changes suddenly from P to F or something like that, or whether it's a crescendo or a diminuendo, and just practice a bar either side of that dynamic change. So for example, let's take the subito P on bar 13. I'm going to go from the beginning of that line, but I'm just going to play a bar or so into where it suddenly drops to quiet. And that's all you need to practice, just that little nugget. At the speed you play, that will take probably about 3.5-4 seconds. But the point is, if you just do those tiny little nuggets, and you do them several times, I mean, you could practice that probably 8-9 times in a minute if you wanted to. But it's almost like drilling the dynamic change, so that you kind of get much more used to sort of automatically doing that there. Obviously, with practicing something like a dynamic change, it's pointless doing it in isolation. You have to kind of practice going from the old to the new, otherwise it's sort of meaningless. It won't kind of be there when you put the whole thing back together. Another example, I don't know, let's pick one on the second page somewhere. Although I thought your dynamics here were really strong, but the diminuendo from bar 26 to bar 27, for example. This is a really tricky one, because the notes here aren't easy at all, are they? And just sort of how much you want. So a really good strategy is to start by massively overdoing it, really kind of almost comically exaggerate it, and then tone it down in each successive practice until you think, I've got that just right. That's kind hopefully you agree that's kind of overkill. That was sort of like toddler let loose of the piano. Imagine a toddler who could play this would be child prodigy by a long way. Good, so that's really it with those. Yeah, well done with that second page in general. You're one of the only people I know who plays this and counts that properly. Thank you and well done. Just be a little bit careful with the those repeating bits there, because you brought one of the left-hand chords in half a beat either too early or too late. It's so easy to do. I would count them in threes. When you get to bar 27, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The trouble with counting them in twos, even though it is a repeated pattern of two, is that not only is it dead easy to lose your place, but you're counting twos, but you're looking at things grouped in threes, so it's just painful for the brain. That, I think, is pretty much it. Just one final thing with this. Rhythm-wise, absolutely spot on in that tricky middle section, but you seem to stumble a little bit on the notes around bars 34, 35, end of that second line, page 2. You know what you're doing there. I think my best advice for kind of getting that really, really good is just practice that a little bit from... But try and do it without looking at your hands at all. Obviously you can look at your hands to get up to the A natural, because it's a bit of a jump up. But from there on, try and do it without looking at all, because if you can play that without looking at your hands at all, it massively reduces the risk that you'll have a slip and a wrong note massively. It's a good kind of principle to follow on the whole. If you don't have to look at your hands kind of find their own way, then it just makes it so much easier to avoid wrong notes. Really good. Blues for Beth. I've hardly got anything to say about that. This was really good. Really come together nicely. It's kind of the same sort of thing. I think with this one, really just more kind of getting the dynamics a bit more obvious and a bit more sort of overstated. So again, what I would do with this, just for small sections, I don't think you should practice this loads, to be honest, or Strumble Head. I would just maybe now and again set aside 5-10 minutes for each one, just to do what I was just describing, you know, that tricky bit without looking, and picking particular bits where the dynamics change. So for example, if we did the same thing with Blues for Beth, I would kind of pick on those sudden changes and those really gradual crescendos. For example, going from the first section to the second section, where it goes from MF to MP. Da, 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 da. Oh, sorry, I did the repeat one, the wrong repeat one. Just so that you can kind of experiment with different levels, and like I say, overdo it to start with, and then tone it down. I mean, I would say that's probably more like an F or an FF to P, but you know, it's hugely subjective anyway. But yeah, start by overdoing it, and then kind of play it a few more times, and get it to the level where you think, yeah, that's about right. Good. I mean, a lot of the dynamics were there, don't get me wrong, but some of them sounded a little bit nebulous, and that in some cases that's fine, because like I say, it is so subjective. What you might deem to be P, an examiner might deem to be MP, for example, and they'll be very kind of hip to that. They're not going to have a sort of, I don't know what a device for measuring decibels is, but one of those at the ready just to check all your relative volumes. It's like the overall kind of shape. But it's things like those gradual crescendos are really tricky. So again, start off by really hamming it up and exaggerating them. I'll do bars 9, 10 and 11. Yeah, and that kind of ended a little bit too heavy-handedly. But actually practicing like that's a really good idea, because it's by exaggerating something, it often makes it kind of go in more sort of habitually. I'm told that sometimes, I'm sure this is true, because the person who told me is an actor, but apparently a trick that actors sometimes use to learn lines that they're really kind of struggling with is they'll shout them kind of, you know, deliberately deliver them or practice them in front of a mirror in a way that they never sort of, you know, say on stage, you know, like kind of barking a sort of really gentle soliloquy or something in a really aggressive voice. But I guess there's something about doing things in a strange way or an exaggerated way that kind of helps it stick in your mind. I can't think of anywhere in these pieces that this would be useful to you, but a useful trick I was taught, which is very useful when you're kind of doing some really tricky advanced stuff. Actually, it might be useful for circus themes, because that is certainly virtuosic, is to repeat the notes. So if, for example, taking for example that horribly difficult bit in the middle, that bit there. Repeat it. It will sound really awful, but repeat each note. It's a really good way of doing it, and then practice them in pairs. So first to second, second to third. Apologies in advance to your family, by the way, because it will be torture listening to you do that. But it's a useful trick. But anyway, I digress. This is meant to be feedback on Strumble Head and Blues for Beth. No, really good. Keep up the good work. Hope there's some tips in there that can prove useful. And I will see you later this week. Have a good one. Take care. Bye.